Hello. Welcome to Everyday Experts, episode number 50. And I got one of my OGs here, as the young kids say, to bestow his wisdom and knowledge. Me and Clarence have an issue in that we could talk for hours about anything. And we were like, all right, we shouldn't talk 20 minutes about education, but we have a lot of stuff we want to get into. Um, Episode 50, Clarence Bess, one of my really good friends. I call him a mentor because he was really one of the people that stopped and just explained stuff to me. He didn't necessarily say, write this, write that. He more took the time and just, I was new, I was young, and he could tell. And our lives are as different as our lifestyles are. They're just fallen in line. And it's really awesome to be here with Clarence. So, without further ado, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Clarence C. Bess. All right, Clarence. Right? So I got an opening for you.
Oh boy.
Then we're gonna go. Then we're gonna get into it. In 2014, Mr. Bess wrote a poem called "Touche." And
Oh wow. Oh
right
God.
into line a lot of what we're talking about and going to be talking about. Touche. The guided hand strikes across the face. Now, action will come, present in full, because the massa and overseer have been bitten. The filled nigger whispers, some with a touch of glee, all with a tinge of fear. It's getting harder to camouflage this plantation's crimes. The world is changing, has changed, and the fruit of those sown seeds have come to fruition. The deal with the devil for a sense of control has the bellies in the sweat. They all thought they'd escape when they first sat at the big table and heartily laughed, "Come, you there, bring unto me my desires." The house niggers wait, closer to the fallout. They feel a sense of security. The having laid with the family at their feet. The floor of Mrs. Room is better than an entire shack saying their faces. Touche, whispers echo at who will be next. I see the new offenders honing their skills of escape and pleading. Watch them observe, interesting their elders' trials and triumphs, gunning for the HNIC. Because that's the one who wields, brings the operation to a stop, even if momentarily. Becomes herald to the mass of diluted faces, to watching, to waiting, to learning, and this regurgitation of history. Yes, indeed. Touche. Clarence Bess at his finest.
I haven't heard that piece. Probably since I wrote it. Like it's just golly. Like it's so weird. I know that it's not really why we're here, but first of all, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, but like it just I forget like 90% of the stuff I've written, and then to hear it back, and I'm like, I know exactly why I wrote that piece. I know what was going on. It's just it brings it all back to me. Brings it all back to me. That's wow. That's oof. Whoa.
So I like it because it's a lot of what's going on now. And this is almost 10 years ago. And it's it's almost like, oh, Clarence, you clairvoyant? Was Clarence just a clairvoyant? And we look and we see and we examine, and we're just like, oh, I don't understand. But I looked at it and I was just like, this is a lot of what's going on. And I want to talk about Will Smith and Chris Rock, but I don't want to talk about it right this second because to me and my interpretation of it, it was a lot of different than a lot of people's. Everybody was looking at it like, oh, he stood up for himself, blah, blah, blah. I don't care about all of that. I am a person of what image are you painting for everybody to see? And then I want to talk about the young lady who did the You Can't See Me from LSU and her response to Joe Biden. I can find Angel Reese.
Okay.
We'll go to that in a minute, though. So when you wrote the poem, like, where was your head at? And I know, I love it. I love old school Clarence.
So it's very interesting that our conversation tonight, we're going to end up getting into education, because that piece had nothing to do with politics. It had nothing to do with the politics of the United States. It had everything to do with the politics of what was going on in my building where I work at the time. And there was a lot of, it was just ugly. There was a lot of ugliness that was going on, and we were getting ready to go through over the next few years like a change in regime, so to speak, just as our country was. And I've always said that schools are many times, well, I think jobs in general, but definitely schools can be a sort of microcosm, or I should say a petri dish of the greater community. You see a lot of the same frustrations. You see those racial frustrations. You see the class frustrations. You see just frustrations on everything that you think you see outside, you can find in a school, and it's really sad that you do. But and you don't believe it, because when I first started, I did not believe that existed in my school community, and then I started to witness it firsthand. I started to experience those things and a lot of those subjects that came up, and this was my way of writing about it. Was talking about this plantation that I worked on, and the masses and the HNICs, people who thought they were in charge and still do, when they're not in charge. It's all there. It's all there. So and that again, like you said, a few years later, there we were under that person whose name I refuse to say, and look what has happened. Look at the people of color who came out in support of him. Look at the things that have been said by people who this person and people like that person could care less about. You know what I mean? Would make policies and are still making policies. A Supreme Court justice who is currently sitting, a Supreme Court justice who we find out was taking donations from billion-dollar donors, who were conservatives, who essentially were saying, "I'm buying your votes. I'm buying your judgment." And it's disgusting. It's just disgusting. But that piece spoke of all of it.
We were talking about Frederick Douglass actually earlier, and I found a quote that I kind of think is it seems like your educational, like professional focus, but also kind of how you write. I would unite with anybody to do right, and with nobody to do wrong. So
I love that. I love that. Oh my God. I love that.
So we're going to go into the education piece. I do want to talk about some of the creative stuff first.
Okay. Sure.
Being Autism Awareness Month and all that stuff. But we have to start with the first question. The first question: if you could come out WWE wrestling style to any song, what song would it be and why? Now I modified that question.
WWE
for wrestling, how they bring people out, whatever.
So my theme song, essentially.
Yeah.
Shaft.
So now, caveat, I like that. I like Shaft. Why Shaft?
First of all, it's funky. Like it was funky then, it's funky now, and about 400 years from now, you're gonna be able to put that shit on, and you're still gonna, those shoulders are gonna get moving, and you're gonna know this is a bad mother. Shut your mouth. You know what I mean? Like you just like it just is what it is. So I've always enjoyed that. I've always enjoyed that piece. The first time I heard Shaft, I was like, yeah, I get it. Yeah, that would be my theme song, Shaft.
I like it. I changed it because originally it was going to be what Prince song would you come out to? Because I could have sworn my Worth in Gold you would have picked a Prince song. What Prince song would you come out to if you had to?
Oh well, okay. That one's, believe it or not, that's actually kind of easy. It would be "Sexy Motherfucker."
I like it. I do want to say that I did pick purple for our color for a reason, but that's neither here nor there. They'd be like, "Purple Rain." I'm not a singer, but anyway, no. I like it. I like it. So let's kind of get into what's been going on, and I want to do a little bit of a deep dive into Touche. Okay. It doesn't have to be Touche because you said a lot. I like the idea of a plantation because when I was tired of work and people were just driving me crazy, I used to be like, oh, heading to the plantation. And do I think that I was a physical slave? No. But do I think mentally that a lot of options and choices are taken away from you by people who think because they have a title or some letters next to their name, they could say whatever and do whatever they want? Yes, I do see the plantation-esque life. So how did you get to that? How did you get the idea of a plantation for you for work?
It became a lot of it had to do with the decisions that were being made by our leader at the time. One, it just felt like decisions were being made, favors were being done, and it was being done to spite definitely the people of color there. It felt like a lot of the hiring, it felt like there was a way of compartmentalizing workers. And the first workers was what I called your elites. A lot of them were from Long Island. And you kind of felt like they weren't a part of the community. They didn't want to be a part of the community. I mean, I saw several people be afraid to walk outside. Yes, it's East New York. It is what it is. Even now, we still we deal with shootings and whatnot. But it was sort of this very like, the little brown people are around me. The little brown people are around me. And it was decisions like that. And then came the next decisions, who your house niggas were. And you had them, and you still have them today. You have what I call the brown wall, or the house niggas. There was a group of brown folks who surrounded these elite white folks and protected them from the people they should be interacting with. And a lot of those were parents, students, other staff members. You sort of had the sassy ghetto person who's I'll speak to the parents because I'm ghetto and I'm sassy, and they'll listen to ghetto and sassy, that type of thing like that. And then you have the big black man, who's gonna come up and and protect you, the little you started seeing. I started seeing this. I would get disgusted. I would get so disgusted. It got to a point where I would look at that person. And everyone knew it too, because my face doesn't hide shit. So I would look at this person and just be like, and the telltale sign of it was after the Orange Menace was elected. Unfortunately, that person didn't even show up the next day, and I felt like they didn't show up the next day because they kind of knew that black folks was gonna be pissed. And I think that person was afraid. I think that person was afraid to show up to work. I think that person was afraid, as a person of non-color. I think they were afraid to show up because they thought the brown folks might give them a piece of their mind that day. And so they retreated.
Good.
So yeah.
We met at the Siegelman open mic, and I didn't read all of it. I know you had made a post about it. a couple of, I want to say a week ago, maybe a couple of days ago, or maybe it was a memory, but I know something you had come up, and I was like, oh yeah.
I know which one you're talking about. Yeah.
Okay, so I know you like paid homage to him I will say a couple of weeks ago, and I always thought it was interesting that it was in Park Slope, because people that don't know New York don't know Long Island. Park Slope is a very affluent area, I have to say correctly, affluent area with a lot of well-to-do bourgeois people who don't know, and for people that don't know, the term bougie comes from bourgeois, you know, and then when they talked about black bourgeois. And it was in a very interesting area for what they were doing, and it was in a Barnes and Noble, so the setting was very interesting, and the juxtaposition of the setting and the content of the material always was interesting to me. What are your thoughts about that?
I have two thoughts about it. First of all, listen, wherever art can thrive is wonderful. Whether it's bougie, whether it's quote unquote ghetto, where it doesn't matter where it is. It's wonderful because art is all about interpretation. You can bring different forms of art into any space and transform it. So that's my first thought on it. My second thought is what actually happened after that first reading. I was the featured artist for that evening, and I did one of my favorites and one of my very famous pieces called "In." So, and I remember, Ken coming up to me afterwards. I remember Ken coming up to me afterwards and saying, I totally understand, what your poem was, but we kind of want to watch our language being in the space that we're in, and whatnot. And I actually took offense to it. I remember taking offense to it. And I ended up writing another piece about that interaction. So it was both a thing of, I got it, but I was also kind of like, that's why we're here. Art, it makes people uncomfortable. You know what I mean? It's yes, the language is there, but if you're actually paying attention to what I'm saying, I'm actually ranting against the use, the just overuse of this word and different connotations of this word. And what does it actually mean now? You got a group of people who are saying, well, it's our term and we can use it and blah, 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 blah. And you got another group of people who are saying, well, you know what? I kind of understand that, but I don't. And it can still be offensive. And then you have another group of people saying, why would you use that word? Because of what the history of that word is and all that kind of stuff. So it was, I wanted all of that to be in there. And I thought it was frankly, I thought it was the perfect space to perform that piece. But nonetheless, it is what it is. But I'm still grateful for the opportunity. Even if we'd been on the sidewalk, I would have been grateful for the opportunity. So yeah.
It was one of the few times where, I really got to be around artists who wrote like I did, because I always felt like, I have a term I say, be an anomaly. I would like to be different. I'm okay with that. Grew up, one of like 4 black people in my elementary school, and it's just like, when you develop artistically, you either develop out in the open and you can go in, or you develop in a closet where you're honing your art, because a lot of people don't decide to ever release their work. So deciding, when do I put my work out and my words out, when you're still learning. And even I think I was 22, 23 when I met you. I was a baby. Yeah, I was a baby.
Wow.
Yeah. I might have been 25, but I wasn't old, and it was just like, wow, the creative space that being around just poets, not an open mic with singers and I'm not knocking that, but it's a different feel when it's
a different feel.
Poets, and they're just doing poetry.
Yes.
How did that kind of, and I know that wasn't your first kind of rodeo, but how did that kind of shape Clarence to who you are now? How did that kind of help put you on the road?
Well, It's weird. I've always said my career in as an artist has been a little ass backwards because back in 2006, I did. I'm sorry, 2007. I did my first like one man show. I'd been writing for years, and I wanted to put myself out there and put my work out there. So I did this thing. I did 2 nights at the Duplex in the West Village. Kind of came up with this concept of sort of telling this story, but it became more about just me really sort of doing my poetry in a very theatric setting in a different way with lighting and whatnot. And and then because of that, people were like, "Oh, well, do you have a book?" And then I published my book, and then because I had just started, I'd only been working for the schools for about a year at that point, and people talk, of course, as they always do in any job, but word sort of got around. And then Mr. Vigorito, Anthony Vigorito, who was a teacher with our organization at the time, word got around to him somehow, I don't know how, but it did, that I was this poet, and we were having a staff development day where everybody was there. We're sitting in the cafeteria, and this, how tall he is. He comes over. He's like, "Hi, I'm Anthony, and you're Clarence, and I hear that you're a poet." No, 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 no. I was like, "Yes."
I do declare.
Exactly. I was like, "Okay," and I ended up giving him one of my books, and he told me about Brooklyn Poetry Outreach, and I was like, you know what? Yeah, great. Great. And the other thing I want to really quickly mention is one of the things that, and I don't know if you realized it, but Brooklyn Poetry Outreach started that by the time it got to Barnes and Nobles, it had gone through several iterations. So it wasn't always just at Barnes and Nobles. And the reason why it started was to give, I believe it was a group of students who were like, I think they were working on a GED or something like that. It was a very core group of people who they wanted to give the opportunity to express their words. And because Ken was who he was, he got involved, and it sort of grew from there. And so by the time I was doing my feature and you came along and whatnot, this thing had been rolling on for a while. So I think the fact that it was happening where it was happening was sort of a nod to how much work that Ken had put into Brooklyn Poetry Outreach, you know what I mean, and the type of relationships that he fostered within the community at the time and whatnot. So yeah.
To be there was like I said, just awesome to not be on Long Island, and there's a lot to be said for people that stay local and then go out of their comfort zone. Because people are like, "Oh, why don't you go to the New Yorican? And it's just like, all right, but
I have heard this so many times, and I'm just like, you know what? Not every poet wanted to be on Def Poetry Jam.
I'm not a slam poet.
Exactly. That's not who I am. You know what I mean? Can I write something like that and possibly do something like that? Yes, I could, but then I feel like it's not true to me. So there you go.
And I think that laid a lot of the foundation for me. Just even have, because poetry is very niche, right? And and it's almost like a solitary, mission, because you can, but you can't really sit down and write poems with some. It's not set up like that. You could create collectively, but you're not going to work on your poem and work on their poem and all that stuff. This is just my opinion. You can push back if you'd like. So to be around the creators who just that juice and who feed you different, it's really nice to be around the poets and people hear different styles, different presentations, even hear like the Tims and you, and hear different people where you're just like, and people that I've grown and connections I made with poets where I'm even working with younger kids, and it's like, oh, well, what do you think of this? You got to have your voice first.
Yes, very true.
That was one of the things. That was one of the first things. You have to be you.
Be you. Be you.
A mistake that makes you humble is better than an achievement that makes you arrogant. So I see that you're working on things because you're always working on things.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the status of your book about your adoption journey? Because right now it's like it's a Oedipus now. So I'm not an Oedipus.
Yes, I know exactly what you're saying. So right now, it's amazing because even since we last spoke, the book itself has evolved, and I think it's finally settled into what it will be. I've come up with a title. I've come up with a title for it. I'm
You
very
start with
excited
love.
about it.
What is it?
No, actually, so this is going to be the world premiere of the title, I guess you could say. It's going to be called.
Hold on, wait. Go ahead. Oh, wait, hold on. I got.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All righty. So here's the world premiere of the title for my new work. It's going to be called Libretto.
Say that again.
It's going to be called Libretto. And it is taken from my love of my growing love of opera, and really just sort of how important music has been in my creative journey, and especially music that. Before I say what I'm about to say, let me state this. Blacks have contributed to all forms of music, okay? And we are stellar in all forms of music. It doesn't matter what form of music we do, we are stellar at it. But it amazes me what we choose, what we allow society to sort of pigeonhole us in terms of us being as musicians. The minute a black artist shows up, someone thinks just R&B or hip hop. They might see jazz as well, but they're going R&B, hip hop, or jazz or gospel. Okay, but if I'm trying to tell you I'm going to do a rock opera or a rock album, then it's kind of like, you know what I mean? If I tell you that I am an opera singer, it's kind of like, you know what I mean? No, we are out there in every version of creativity, of creative expression that there is, over COVID, I really sort of started to connect to several operas. One that has really deeply influenced the pacing of this book is Philip Glass's Akhenaten. Philip Glass's Akhenaten is massive to me. But on the flip side of that, the Broadway musical unfortunately closed, and it's now playing in a limited run in the UK in London, was A Strange Loop by Michael, I think it was Michael R. Jackson. It was my story in so many ways, and the story of so many other men that I've known, and also over this time I got to see Terrence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones, which is another massive influence for me, a piece that is very close to my own personal journey, and without giving things away, I understand that pain and that and the way history treats Black men who just so happen to be gay. I did not want to say gay Black men. I want to say Black men who just so happen to be gay. Our community, our families have done a lot of damage to us. And for years, we've just been told to change and to shut up and deal and whatnot, and that the Lord would deliver you. And one of the ways I believe that the Lord or the universe delivered me was by removing me from those individuals and those places, and allowing me to grow creatively and see that, you know what, there was nothing wrong with me. I've always been a beautiful person. I'm gonna always be a beautiful person. I'm not perfect, but guess what? My light is just as important as yours and everyone else's. So libretto is my opportunity to express that journey, and how it connects and why it became so important for me to complete the circle and find my biological family. And that's the purpose of libretto. So
wow. Oh, so many questions.
yeah.
We're gonna go back to the meat of it in a second, but you said something
Okay.
that really resonates with me. And you said the influence that music has kind of had on your writing. I'm too, because I started off writing raps, and I just didn't like the whole having to be constricted to a beat. Some people say treeing. I feel like it's constricting. Having to work with a beat. And then, as I grew into poetry, I realized how much of an influence hip hop, rap, whatever music I was listening to, pop music, the lyricists, had on me. So go a little bit more into your relationship with music and poetry and how it kind of shaped your book, which I don't think it's just poetry, right? It's more a novel.
No, this is going to be my first. This is my first novel. This is my first chapter book. It is in three parts, like most operas are written in three acts. The first act is Florida. The second act is New York, and the third act is specifically the journey of finding my biological family. And it's, by the time, like I said, by the time I you make it to the third act in this book, I'm hoping that those first two acts, by the way they're written and the way they flow, that the understanding is there why the third act is so important, and whatnot. Yeah, but music for me, it's always been. I started writing when I started writing because of music, and it's a story I tell in the book itself, about why I started writing in general. I started writing because of a lie to my father. You know, I was never a good student, and I needed to pass off something as homework. A teacher, Mrs. Vukovic, she was an English teacher at the time. Vukovic, though students did call her by another name behind her back. She told us about a contest that was happening, about writing a one-page story for a local newspaper. And I decided that that's what I was going to tell my father that my homework assignment was. And I remember going into my bedroom, pulling out some loose leaf paper, and I didn't have a desk or a thing to write on, so I had to write on my bed. And I remember kneeling at my bed and taking out like a notebook of this loose leaf paper, and I started to write, and I just kept writing. I didn't know that that I didn't know that what I was doing was that inner part of me was finally saying, "Oh, you can now talk. Here's how you can talk. You can speak now." And so I just started writing. I became known amongst students at the time as the kid who wrote short stories. I was the kid. I was the writer. I was the writer kid. And one of my classmates came up to me and asked me one day if I had ever written a song. And I told him yes, which of course was a complete lie. And I ended up writing. He was in some sort of like which would be considered a metal band. He was, dreams of being a metal artist and whatnot. And so I wrote this song. And I gave it back to him, and he liked it, and I loved it, and I was like, wow, I'd like to do this. And at the time, I was really into heavy metal, and I would literally, and my parents don't even know this. I would sit in church, and I remember someone had given me a Bible for my birthday, and I would literally sit in my Bible. I wish I still had it. It was this blue leather Bible, and with the silver edges to the pages. It was really nice. And I would literally write the lyrics to Slayer songs and Metallica songs in
I
this
love it.
Bible. And while I was doing that, I didn't realize that I was sort of teaching myself songwriting. I growing up in the church, of course, your singing is a big part of it, and of course, in any Southern Black church, we got rhythm. You know what I mean? That we're not tuned out. We have rhythm, and so I understood rhythm. You know, I understood rhythm, and I started to write a lot of things based upon church rhythms. I wrote a lot about the things I saw in church and the type of people I saw in church. One of them, I recently, a classmate of mine who I want to thank. Her name is Tina Barnhart, or now Tina Johnson. She was so wonderful. I had reached out to several people, and a couple of them had got back in contact with me. But Tina just so happened to have the books from our high school. Um, I was the editor of my school's literary magazine in my senior year, and she not only had that one, but she had a couple of the years, all 3 years that I was on the staff. And I was looking back at some of my poems that were in them, and one of them was about one of them, two of them actually were about they were church poems, and I clearly remember writing them, about watching people come to announce their faith and to give themselves over to Christ and stuff like that. So that's where music sort of began to influence my writing. And then the more I wrote, I swear it was like I would literally sit and everything was based on a rhythm. Everything was based on I'd literally hum my poems to myself. So it's not that they were meant to be songs, but songs helped me write. And so music has always had a huge influence on my work, massive influence on my work. But again, when I started writing this book, sort of going in different areas, 1 minute it was all about the finding my biological parents. The next minute it was kind of like, okay, I want to talk about sort of a mix between this and that and da da da. And then it all made sense. It all made sense about music. Music is the heart of everything for me. Music was probably one of my biggest arguments in my family growing up, as people will read about. Everything I listened to was called devil worshiping music. Whether it was The Cure, or whether it was a Marilyn Manson, it was I might as well have been slitting a goat's throat and all and drinking blood. My sister and my mother thought that I was like hanging inverted crosses and saying hell, Satan, and all this kind of stuff like that. And I'm just like, I want to look at both of them and just go, "You fucking idiots!" But you don't do that out of respect. But right. It's like but to think that I was just one, and how many other people, kids growing up who looked like me, were going through the exact same thing. This feeling of loneliness and isolation. People do not understand what that does to a person, especially what it does to a child. And with there being no internet, with there being no phones, no tablets, no computers that you could just zap around and do and expose yourself to other people who were like you, you were left believing you were alone, that you were the only one. And because you are the only one, and no one likes you, then the world doesn't like you. The world doesn't love you. No one is capable of loving you. You are not capable of loving them the way they need for you to love them. It does a number on you. And it wasn't until truth be told, it wasn't until I moved to New York that where those things start to change. So I hope that explains it.
That explains a lot of the thing, because like I think they're artists, and then I think there's like pure artists, people who just have like art coming out of their bones, their eyeballs, and all that stuff. I consider myself I consider myself a writer. I've always said that, you know. And then you kind of grow into an artist, I guess. So I'm an artist, yes. But then I think like you're a pure artist. A pure artist does the theater, does you have so many different things that art just is a part of who you are, and it's innate. Like I learned, I had to learn and I had to adapt skills where like I said, a writer, do poet, I can do that stuff. But there are things that I just think that, like you were saying, are just so innate in your journey that makes your art and your skill just really admirable and it's really impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So I have a fun question I like to ask my artistic people.
Okay. Okay.
Of the music and the theater and the acting and the singing and I'm not singing, the performing and the poetry and the writing. If you could only pick one to do for your life, which one would you pick? Yes, it's it's a hard question.
Well, now they are so interconnected, but at the end of it all, my heart is always going to be with writing. That's who I am.
Yes.
I could give up every other part of my artistic being if I absolutely had to, but writing is such a fundamental part of who I am. I think in writing. I exist in writing. I communicate in writing. The people I work with directly, like the teacher that I'm working with, now, there's been a couple of little things I've written, and he'll just be like, "Yo, the way you explain, the way you write it, da 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 da," and I tell him, I'm like, "That's just what I do. That's who I am. Like it's me not writing is the same as me not breathing. Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. So people see me as a visual artist. I've done a lot of work on working on my visual artistry. I love that. It's something that I can't wait to expose you guys to even more. I'm doing some really cool, exciting things with that as well.
Oh, I forgot visual art. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. But my writing is, where my soul is. It's the only way you're ever gonna get to know me. You and I could sit and talk all day long. I could meet a stranger and talk to them, but they will never know who I am if they don't read what I write. And that's what it is.
Mr. or Miss Integrity for Life says, "Hey, Bess, sending love and support from Brazil, Sir Joker."
Oh, thank you, thank you, Miss Integrity for Life. Thank you. Enjoy Brazil. Enjoy Brazil.
Have fun.
I'm jealous.
Have fun. I love it. Me not writing is the same as me not breathing. So, I did a half relationship book, half poetry book. Now I'm working on a book on autism, and we're going to go into that because we both actually have a lot of involvement with that.
Yes.
The journey of creating a novel versus the journey of putting together a collection of poems. For me, it's like, I think one of the biggest struggles was, how can I be more long-winded? No, how putting together a novel is just a different recipe, so to speak.
It is. It's a completely different beast. And, the first thing I had to tell myself, and I don't know what you told yourself, but the first thing I had to honestly tell myself was, Chris, please take a second and trust yourself. Trust yourself. Just do what you do. Don't try to think of stuff too much. Just write. And this is one of the things I constantly have to tell people who are trying to become writers and write things. There's someone I know who's trying to publish books, and the first thing I told this person, I said, right? You have to write it first. Okay. Don't get caught up in all the extra stuff around it. You have to write it first. Get it written. Okay. And once you get it written, then it'll tell you where it's gonna go. It'll tell you how you should go. It will give you the path to follow. So for me, the big difference, the first big difference was, first of all, I have a shit ton of poetry. I have a ton of poetry. I'm not even gonna go there. I mean, you just the very piece you started off with Touche, just another example again about how I've written so much I just don't remember everything, and I'm like, but I do know it. But oh my god, it's been years. So I can always kind of I can pull in some old stuff. I can write some new stuff. About poetry is like da 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 da. But a novel is very different. It's very much I literally have 4 pages as an outline of, and we haven't even gotten to. I've only of those 4 pages, maybe a half a page is the beginnings of New York. We haven't even, most of that is Florida, and there's so much to tell in Florida. And I'm already seeing how pieces that I've written about in Florida, in that sort of first act, I've already gone, okay, I love this story, but let's see if that's going to actually stay in the book. You know what I mean? I might take, what I mean? But the point is, it's all getting written. It's all getting written. It's all getting written.
Do you? I know a big thing that's always in the back of my mind, especially with a daunting topic like autism, but anything or relationships, not leaving stuff out. I feel like that's always and I know I can't cover every base, but I want to try to cover 89% of the bases.
Well, but okay, so truth be told, I think because of what you're writing a very I would have to say research-based, book. There's a lot of studies and facts and whatnot. And da, 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 da. This book for me is it's a personal journey. So I've had a lot of conversations with individuals where they've gone, do you think what you're writing can and will hurt people? And I have to say, my response has been, the intent is not to hurt. The intent is to tell my story as my experience. And can I control anyone's interpretation of my experience? No. The same way they cannot control my interpretation of their experience. I can't control your interpretation of my experience. All I can do is tell you, this is what my experience was. This is how it made me feel. And you take it from there. One of the major reasons why I am writing this particular book, why I'm writing Libretto, is because something my sister, it was sort of my sister, I have her to thank, oddly enough. My sister, I published a couple of pieces that might appear in the book, and my sister was very upset by one of them. And she said to me that I needed therapy. And I was like, you're right. I do need therapy. Part of the reason why I'm writing this book is because this is one of those versions of therapy for me. This is the first sort of basis of therapy for me, is I need to get it off my chest. And the best way I've learned for me to get something off of my chest, if I can't talk to the individuals directly who I need to talk to, is to write about it. I was concerned when I first started writing this book, and then I stopped myself, and I actually started to look back at all the things I've written over the last, let's say about over 30 plus years, the things that I've written over the last 30 plus years. I've been telling this story via poetry all this time. it is. I felt it was finally time for me to stop hiding behind metaphor and hiding behind again metaphor in poetry and poems, and start just telling the story. Even though the story in many parts of it, many parts of it, has already been published and written, or published and or written via my poems. I look back and I go, oh wow, there's this story that's up, but there's this story via, it's all there, it's already there. It's just that it's in a different language. It's in a very sort of other language. And now here's my way of telling that same story, but just straight up. Here you go, pot out. Here's what it is. You know what I mean? Let's not hide behind a metaphor of a plantation. Let's not hide behind a metaphor of a tree. Let's not hide behind dreams and whatnot. Let's talk about what the actual pieces really mean, and where what inspired them.
Woo! I can't wait to read it. I know it's going to be epic as usual. Like I said, your works are.
Thank you.
And what I like about your style is that it's pretty different than mine, but I still can always pull stuff from your style. And I always learn. Like, even when I read this one, I was like, oh, okay. Like, you were one of the people that, you never said this, but you were one of the people that made me sort of see the beauty in the shorter pieces. You know, in the I got to breathe when I'm presenting, and I got to take my time. I got to actually, I'd be like, and, you know, when you're teaching and when I'm in front of somebody, even when I'm doing therapy, any of these things, that your words have more power when you let them sit and breathe sometimes. Just for a second, just the pause.
Yeah.
Just like, well, let me say that again. You know,
yeah.
When people do the refrains, they write them in. A lot of times I'll be like, let me just refrain this when I'm performing it. And like a lot of nuanced stuff I picked up from you. And, you know, I thank you for that.
Again, thank you.
Last question, and then we'll move into the fun stuff, the highly, the hot button topics. Was there like a piece of art? It could be a song, it could be a movie, it could be a poem, it could be a book that you digested and you were like, this is me. This is my life. When you were younger, not necessarily now, when you were younger, that pulled you into, oh, yeah.
Okay, so I was a television kid. I love television. My mother used to say how she could tell time based upon, she would ask me what show was on. I that's how I told time, was what show was on. You know what I mean? Like I knew television like the back of my hand. You know what I mean?
Then facts of life.
Exactly. It just, you knew, like Saturday at 9 o'clock. Oh, yep. You know, you just, that's how I was. I really loved television, and though I love television, I love the movies even more. And I don't remember seeing a lot of movies as a kid in theaters, but a movie that that always stood out to me. I used to watch it every time I would go to my grandparents. It was The Never-Ending Story. I loved this movie. I loved this movie so much, and I didn't know why. That's the key. I didn't realize how influential this movie was going to be on me. And it was massively influential on me, and a lot of it. So before I explain, I'm gonna go. So there's actually several pieces, not just one.
Okay.
In terms of a movie, it was The Never-Ending Story. In terms of music, music, it was Jenny's Got a Gun.
Really?
Janie's Got a Gun by Aerosmith.
Wow.
In terms of books, it was Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, very specifically the first book, The Gunslinger, and the third book, called The Wasteland.
Mm.
When you put them all together,
Okay.
if you look at all of them, they all are themes of escape. As a child, all I wanted to do was escape. I just wanted to leave. And I didn't realize that until I became an adult, where I could look back and go, everything I loved was about getting away. And it allowed me to sort of go back and go, why would a child be so focused on getting away? And these pieces sort of spoke. These pieces spoke to that. The never-ending story. Here's a boy, and years later when I read the book, I understood even more so. It's a story essentially about in the movies, as classic as the original is, it does a complete disservice to the book.
Mm-hmm.
The boy in the book, he is ridiculed. He is made fun of. He's this fat little kid who, and I wasn't. I was just this always little beanpole. But he's this kid who's taunted. Nobody likes this kid. He doesn't feel like the family likes him. The teachers don't like. No one likes this kid, and his only place of escape is in books.
Mm-hmm.
And by traveling into this book, he learns that you can't run from who you are.
Yep.
And who you are is fine. You're gonna change. You're gonna try to change some things, and you're gonna go through some things and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you have to trust in who you are, because that is where your strength lies. I did not get that growing up. Jenny's Got a Gun is easy. It was about a girl who kills her abuser, and I loved this song. I understood this song like nobody's business. I was like, I get it. I completely get it. And coupled with that one was a song by Pearl Jam called Jeremy. And the only reason Yes, Jeremy Smoking in class today. And I have another story that's in the book that you read about. And my biological father and I, we was talking about this story. I actually told him this story one night over the phone, about something that happened to me when I was in junior high school. And I remember seeing Jeremy, the video for Jeremy, and it was like, holy crap. Like I understood that kid. I understood him. I understood him very, very well. And then with Stephen King's Dark Tower series, the boy Jake is the main character in the first book, The Gunslinger. During The Gunslinger, Jake is sacrificed by the main character, Roland. Roland has to make a decision to reach his goal. Roland has got to decide: is he gonna save this boy who sort of didn't choose to be there? He did not choose to be where he was. He sort of ended up there. I did not choose to be adopted. I sort of ended up there, and I identified with Jake because this man who he sort of viewed as his father, as a father figure, decides to sacrifice him to get what he wants.
Mm.
And it spoke to all of this religious dogma that I grew up with, and Christ, giving up his only son, Jesus, the Lord giving up his only son, and stuff like that. It all flowed into that, and my relationship with my father, flowed into that. I was felt like my father sacrificed me, like I was sort of a sacrifice. It was just something I was sort of something he just had to do, and then it was like, okay, I've done what I was supposed to do with you. Now go, you know what I mean, sort of thing. And then later on in the third book, Jake returns, and it starts with Jake's complicated relationship with his actual father, and the father just is a tyrant. to this kid, and his, he has very little protecting him, and that he has to escape to this other world in order to become the man that he was to become. They're massive influences.
So I think it's interesting that you said that your dad sacrificed you, and you have dedicated your life to helping
to children,
to children,
to helping children.
To make sure they don't get sacrificed, especially with the population that you work with. You said 17 years.
Yep.
You've been a para professional, right? Or
yes. Yep.
A para. We'll make sure I get the title correct. You've been a para for 17 years. You've been working with kids on the spectrum.
Yes.
For New York City, which means you're a triple OG, because a lot of times the public schools get the worst of the worst, and a lot of kids don't care and don't want to be there, and they don't know why. When it's not emphasized that you have to go to school, they're just there because my dad tells me I have to go, my mom tells me I have to go. How has working with kids on the spectrum kind of impacted your professional life and impacted you personally too?
The first major thing in terms of their influences is I'm a bit calmer. I think because of age, and sort of understanding. One of the things I sort of preach now about new people who are coming in is I think that everyone should be required to work with the different populations, especially when it comes to special needs. You should be required to, at some point, work with the physically disabled students. You should be required to work with students who are on the spectrum. You should be required to work with students who are really mostly behavioral and emotional and whatnot. I think when you learn when you've worked with the different populations, it gives you a sense of balance, and you learn something different in each of those categories in terms of working with those types of students and populations. My students that I've worked with the last several years, especially because they are on the spectrum, it's very, I find myself laughing because I look at them and I go, it's just, they make me laugh, and they're just wonderful, and they just are who they are. They are who they are, and you see all this possibility in them, especially my higher functioning ones, where I tell them all the time, I'm like, do you know why I talk to you? Do you know why I get on you so much? I get on you because I know that you can. And I know that, there's a world full of possibilities out there for you, but you're going to have to work extra hard, because I'm not going to lie to you. The one thing I will tell every student is I'm never going to lie to a student. I'm never going to lie to them. I will never tell a student, oh, it gets easier. No, it only gets harder. Sorry. It only gets harder. Sorry. Yeah, that's the truth. It's not going to get any easier. Sorry. Sorry. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. This here is, you better wake up. Okay. Mommy's not always going to be there. Mommy, daddy, auntie, they're not going to always be there. And if you're not careful, then the world is going to view you a certain way. And you got to work. You're already going to have to work 10 times as hard, but you're behind right now. And it's not that you can't catch up, but you're going to have to do a lot of work in order to catch up. And you're going to have to advocate for yourself. Advocacy for our students is very important, not entitlement, advocacy. That, I think, is a huge problem that we have. Is, I think, education, I think I spoke to you about earlier, education today seems more about entitlement than it does advocacy. It's my child's entitled to. My child's entitled to. This is entitled to. But how about just advocating, and not just advocating for your child, but advocating for students who are like your child? Okay. You spoke of IEPs earlier. You spoke of IEPs earlier.
So IEP is individualized educational plan.
Yes. I'm sorry for those out
there. No, you're
fine. So IEPs are very interesting to me. The one thing that no one seems to understand, unless they go to school upstate, they're in a wealthy neighborhood somewhere, is that it is a legal document. It's amazing how parents. I don't know. You're a parent, and I'm not. What is it in being a parent that causes parents to sort of not like I don't like they still they see this grown behind child, and they see them in diapers. They literally see them in diapers. They literally see them as little girls, little boys, they're babies, and this kind of stuff like that. It's like, what is wrong with you? It doesn't matter whether your child is in a wheelchair or whether your child is verbal, nonverbal. It doesn't matter. They are getting older. They're going to become adults. They need to be a part of society in a way that enables them to be as self-sufficient as they possibly can. And you have people who will literally sit there and argue that there is nothing that their child needs, and then wait until their child is getting ready to go to a high school where they're going to get their ass kicked to suddenly say, well, my child can't do it. My child can't do it. I need you to change their IEP. That's entitlement. That is not advocacy. That is entitlement. Well, too many people are teaching entitlement versus advocacy.
I think so. To kind of suss out some of your discussions, I see the same thing. I see that, I've worked in group homes, I've worked in day programs, I've worked in residence. So I've seen a lot of the different aspects. I've been in CSEs, and a lot of parents just don't. First of all, they don't understand. They don't have the education of the process. They don't understand what goes on in the process, and then they just take school or the committee's word for whatever they say. Now, I'm not knocking the committee, but you have to know your child and know your child's needs and be realistic about those needs. Yeah, are there times when the school drops the ball? Yes, but are there times when your kid drops the ball? Yes. Both of those have to be. It has to be a collaboration of everybody working together. And I think the parents that see the entitlement, they don't want to hold their kids responsible for their own lives.
Very interesting. Yeah. So the question started out with how have they influenced me, and like I said, a lot of it is the fact that they calm you down. You start to look at the other types of students that we get, and it helps you understand how to interact with them. Everything from tone of voice to just your approach and what are the needs. You start to recognize there are a lot of students walking around in schools that they are not diagnosed as autistic or it being on the spectrum, and yet they are. You know what I mean? The system is doing them a massive disservice by not pushing the parents. Like, listen, your child is on the spectrum. You might want to think, you know what I mean? You might want to consider, but the child just languishes in a classroom where they can barely, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They socially might seem like they're okay, but yet they're not, you know what I mean? And they need a better program. They need a better structure. They need things, so yeah.
And a lot of times what I've seen is when kids are well behaved or aren't a problem, all of a sudden you forget about their diagnosis and well, yeah, I know that. I know that this. I know that. But they're doing okay. But that's not the point. The need is still there because yes, they're doing well now. But and our job is to prepare these little humans for the world. How you're not preparing them, they're not always going to just be able to have somebody. And accommodations are important. They're not always going to have somebody to read them stuff and to take time and get. They're going to have to learn to adjust and advocate.
Exactly.
And advocate as well.
Yes, I just had a situation happen last week before we went on break where I was teaching kids money, and so I'm working with a group. I tend to work with a higher functioning group in my setting, and one of them, he's a bright kid. I give them the money and I take them step by step on what to do, and then I watched him do his work. Just about every problem wrong. Just about every problem wrong.
Right.
So then, as an educator, what do? I give. So I say, okay, let me try this. So here's the calculator. Now I'm going to teach you step by step how to use the calculator.
Right.
Took the calculator. He understood how to use it, and he got every question right. I was explaining to the teacher, I said, there's a program that we're trying to introduce to our school called PACE, PAES. I forget what the acronym stands for. But one of the things about PACE is it teaches advocacy. It's putting them in a real world situation. So when they walk into a job, if they need they're supposed to put a screw together. They're supposed to actually put two nuts on a bolt, and that's going to be their job. They might need something designed that allows the screw to be held in place because they don't have the dexterity to actually do the job. As educators, what we do is we see them and we go, well, wait a minute, why don't we do it like this? And we show them how to do it, and then we pick up their hand and we, When you're in the real world, there is no one there to do that for you. This program teaches advocacy, teaches them how to actually speak up and say, hey, listen, I can do the job, but I need this specifically in order for me to do the job.
Right.
Complete difference in changing a way of thinking. Advocacy is extremely important.
Yeah. And parents, when they should advocate for, they also should teach how to advocate for themselves. Yes, you got to advocate for your parent, but you also have to teach as a parent, but you also have to teach your son, daughter to say, okay, well, I need this or I need that. And, that's, a big difference.
Yeah.
So we were talking about entitlement, and we started going over this when we were talking before the show started. So it was called Operation Varsity Blues, the college admission scandal by Rick Singer.
Oh.
Rick Singer was the man who got involved with all these rich and famous people, helping him figure out how to skirt the academic admissions process. He called it a side door. People were donating money and all this stuff, and this guy was like a millionaire operating, hands-free, doing all this stuff, getting these kids into this prestigious, the Stanfords, the Harvards, the Yales, and all this stuff. He had connections, and he was just really good at what he did. And we talked about entitlement, and we were going back and forth a little bit where I look at it, and you can make your counter arguments. Like I look at it as if, you already have umpteen things in your favor. Now you need somebody to lie for you to give you, if you have 20 things in your favor, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, where I had to get into college, somebody else to get into college just based on their merit alone. So it was interesting. It's on Netflix. It's called Operation Varsity Blues. People should check it out if they haven't. It's a really good story. It's really interesting, and you see, how people that are entitled move different than people who have to kind of struggle and have to maintain. But you can say your piece. But you were saying you had a good counter argument. I liked it.
I'm trying to remember what I said, honestly, because I was in the heat of the moment.
Oh, okay.
I was in the heat of the moment when we were talking about it originally. I don't remember.
It's okay. We can come back to it.
We started with the what was it? Was it Felicity Huffman or was it? Who was
Felicity Huffman, yeah, from Full House, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, for what? I think I was going on to say, how it goes so much further than that. It goes so much further than just getting them in. And what ends up happening is I was going to tell you the story about. I have this friend of mine. He'd worked in corporate for many years, and he was working for Macy's at the time. And he worked in a sort of department that did a lot of writing. Right. And he was hiring someone for this department. So he was interviewing candidates and whatnot. And a woman came in and, da da da, hello, da da da. They went through the whole interview process and everything like that. And of course, it ended. He said, thank you very much. We'll be in contact with you and whatnot, da da da. And I will never forget what he said to me. He said, this woman, who no doubt had parents who essentially, just gave her the world on a damn platter and just somehow educated her that she was entitled to whatever she wanted, when she wanted, how she wanted it. She looked at him and she said, well, do I have the job or not? And he said, I'm sorry. She says, well, based upon the interview, do I have the job or not? And he was like, and he said, well, we're considering several candidates. We'll consider different people, and we'll be in contact with you. And she said, well, no. She goes, look at my education. Look at where I went. Look at where I went. And I, in my resume, I should be. I think she had graduated from like Brown or some. She graduated from some prestigious school. And he was just sort of like, what the fuck? So in the back of his head, he's going, okay, I got to put on my HR pants here. You know what I mean? And kind of be careful about what I say here. So he literally took her resume and he said, could you please reiterate to me the job you were applying for? And she said it was some sort of staff writer or whatever like that, some sort of writer position. And he said, okay. He says, that's wonderful. He said, now, he goes, I want you to look at your resume. I want you to look at your resume. And can you please go through your resume, go step by step and find all of find anything that needs to be corrected in your resume? And she was like, well, no, my resume is perfect. And he's like, okay, well, let me start here. Boom, 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 boom. He took her through her resume. He said, as you stated, you're applying for a position as a writer. Your interview, I felt was great and whatnot. Based upon your interview, we'll be in contact. Like that. And he was just like the balls of this woman. You know what I mean? But that's what these types of things breed. That's what this entitlement breeds. Is you have people walking into jobs thinking that I'm supposed to have this. I'm supposed to have that. And listen, even with what I do, I have seen people walk in and because they mama is working in the building, or their daddy, or their auntie, or their cousin. Well, I'm supposed to be treated a certain way. I'm supposed to, like, it is ridiculous, this sense of entitlement, and it all leads back to what people are doing in terms of parenting. Here we go, entitlement versus advocacy. You know what I mean? I'm like, there is one thing for you to walk into a job and say, I would need this in place in order for me to be able to do my job as well as I can, versus, oh no, you're supposed to give me this because it's, and unfortunately you have a lot of that today.
It's so much. It's so much. And especially when you add the nuance of education and add the extra nuance of special needs, because, people just don't have a breadth of scope of what autism is in their child. Like, you can understand autism. But autism for Clarence and autism for Achille are two different things. And people don't understand that. And they don't know how to, well, you did this for him and her, and you did this. Well, your son, daughter can't do that. They're not at that level. Every time I try to take them out, they're trying to knock people upside the head. I can't take a bowling ball into the community and be like, oh, here, you're okay. And that understanding and that, almost having to teach life skills to these kids who aren't getting it reinforced at home is so hard. It's so hard. 17 years as a professional. Congratulations.
Yes.
A lot. As a professional, what's changed in you? You're like, what's changed your approach to the job in 17 years? I know the kids are different, but how has that changed Mr. C. Bess?
Okay, so the honest answer is I'm vested. I think to myself, your pension, your pension, your pension, your pension. I'm
That's
like,
real.
I literally think to myself, you have 10 years to go, your pension, you're vested, you got to protect that. Start from there. Start from there. And then I think to myself, after that, I think to myself, what does your contract say? What does your contract say? What does your contract say? I have learned firsthand the importance of understanding your rights, and understanding that knowing what your rights are and making sure that you one advocate for your what's right, and help others advocate for what's right. You know, I probably that's been the biggest change in me. I think I really have become more and more of a promoter of self advocacy, and I believe in it completely, because I've seen the difference it can make. Definitely with my students, and definitely with myself. Yeah.
I know working with humans for a long time, my writing has evolved in where I learned I learned how to be more introspective and learn how to observe more and kind of just get a feel for people and where they're coming from. And I think that's
Mm,
made my writing better because I'm able to
mm,
be more introspective, but also be more critical of people, but be fair when I need to be fair. Um,
yes, yes, yes.
but I do
You
think that
know,
you have to learn how to do that as you get older. So how have you changed artistically?
artistically, I would have to say I take more risk. I am I the the biggest thing now for me as an artist is I accept my artistry. I
Ooh.
accept who I am as an artist. I accept the fact that I am a creative person, and that what I put out there is my vision, and that's it. You
Mm.
like it, you like it, you don't, but I'm going to put my vision out there. And it has allowed me to embrace as much creativity as I possibly can. Um, you know, when I first started out, yes, I was just writing. I was just writing. That was it. And then that led to me sort of saying, okay, oh, I want to do this. So I need to have this part of it. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, I see how that can influence this. And then just looking at how everything is connected. And it's really propelled me into what I want the next phase of my creative and professional life to be. This again, this current project that I'm doing has so much more attached to it than just the book itself. I can't get into it here, but
That's fine.
all I'm going to say is stay tuned, because I'm hoping over the next, definitely by the end of this year, to be making some announcements about some things
Ooh.
that I want to do next year, to springboard springboard me into that next level. And
Mm.
like I said, it's all connected to this book, libretto, that I'm currently writing. But yeah, that's the difference of my artistry now. You said this thing about being observant. I think I've always been observant.
Mhm.
Um, I think it came from just the way I grew up. When you grow up in a household where your words really don't matter, and they're not asked for
Mhm.
very often, and they're usually only asked for in response to needing an explanation for something, which means you better respond a certain way.
Mhm.
You're left with observations. All you're left with is sort of watching and listening and sort of taking it in. And I think that's one of the things, people talk a lot of times about one of the things I hear amongst my coworkers and even older adults, from older family members and stuff like that, is about, when I was a kid, you didn't want to be in grown folks' business. Okay. Children today are in a lot of grown folks' business. But one of the things that I don't think those people realized who were adults when I was a child is, even though you didn't want us in grown folks' business, I think they needed to learn communication and how important communication was, and how important it is for a child to understand and learn two-way communication.
Yeah.
It is important for children to learn how to express themselves, and that they need to understand when it is both appropriate and inappropriate, and how to express themselves when it might be necessary, even though it's kind of inappropriate. Because I did not learn those things, I understood how to respond, when to respond, but I didn't understand the importance of being able to respond. So I ended up becoming an observer. And that was most of my life. Even when I moved to New York, and I was primarily an observer. I did not know how to step outside of the observer. And in the book, I talk about the vices that I developed in order to help me step outside of being an observer and become someone who is actually interacting.
Love it.
So that's the biggest change. That's the biggest change.
So, somehow ended up in your blog again, your poetry blog. And the last question is going to be about a poem that you wrote in January of 2014 called Everywhere. And I want you to tell me how it kind of resonates with you today, because when I read it, I hear a lot of the messages fulfilled, almost like a letter to yourself.
Oh, wow.
Everywhere. I don't want to be a friend, but it's you I see everywhere. I don't want to give you my love, but with the word, I feel you there, everywhere. If ever you would take my hand, I'd just follow you everywhere. Even as you closed your eyes, through the darkness, you'd feel my stare, everywhere. Dreams of you in light, greet of my vision constantly. God's message, possibly. The weight sometimes suffocates, of an answer so complete, to speak those words would. I don't want to be a friend, but it's you I feel everywhere. Air I breathe. What I ingest to be complete. If only I could say those words without consequences. Maybe, just maybe. Their faces would not haunt, proximity not creep. So close to that place where I fall, and that line blurs between 1 and 3. Laden words of scarce simplicity, if only. So,
Wow.
I read that, and it's almost like, damn, was Clarence writing a letter to himself? And I know it might have been about somebody else, but if you take what you just told me and your journey and where you are, the question is two parts. How does Everywhere resonate with you now? And could Clarence in 2014 have written his book? He's working on libretto now. Could you have written that today?
Okay, that's the easier answer. That's actually the easier answer. There's no way I could have written it then. Though there's a great portion of me that is, the same as I was then, there's also a massive portion of me that is not. Just the death of my partner at the time, the what this country has been through, and what I've seen this country go through since writing that piece. It's monumental. It's just monumental. There's no way I could have written what I'm currently writing then. Again, with that being said, even though everything I'm writing right now has already been written, It was written in the form of a poem. The saying those three words, it's so weird because for me that poem, it falls in two categories. It falls in me before I found my biological family, and it definitely falls into me after I found my biological family. It those three words are "I love you." And though when I wrote that piece, I think I was talking more specifically about an individual, but looking at it in terms of my familial relations, it's very poignant. And again, it's right across the face because I'm like, oh God, I wrote that. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it's really making me want to go back and really sort of go really deep into my stuff because again, and just even with what I've already gone back into, I've seen it all. I've seen it all. It's all there, and it's so weird. It's a little weird for me, but it also allows me to understand that libretto is exactly where I need to be. Where I should be right now in my life. And that makes me excited. That makes me very, very, very excited because I think I told you this. And I'll kind of leave you off with this. When COVID occurred, actually before COVID occurred, from the moment, literally when my partner died, I was processing that, and then not too long after that, Prince died, which is such a massive influence for me. And then all of a sudden, this guy, this unspeakable horror, was nominated, to run for president for a group of people, and that person and so many people in this country voted for that person against someone who wasn't perfect by any means necessary. That person wasn't perfect, but was the definite, clear, reasonable choice someone would make. How fucking stupid could you be? But it happened. And it was so draining. All of that was so draining that it sucked away it literally sucked the creativity out of me. I wrote less during the years between that person becoming president and finding my, sort of beginning this process of finding my biological family. I've never written so little. I've never written so little, and and people are like, "I'm surprised you're not writing. I'm surprised you're not writing." And I kept saying to them, "It's so overwhelming. There's almost too much to write about. I just feel like that while I'm trying to construct one piece, literally there's 50 million other pieces that can get constructed, and I just can't. I can't do it. I can't focus. And this allowed me to have focus. This allowed me to have focus, and a massive return to my creativity.
And a lot of times, I think some people talk about the fallacy of writing every day. You could write every day, but I always think that you need everybody. They need breaks in their brain. They need times when they can just not always be trying to create, because then you're trying to create and you're not creating, if that makes sense.
Well, listen, but you know what? Yes and no. Ken Siegelman. Yeah, Ken Siegelman, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget hearing that he wrote every day. He got up and he wrote every day. I know a painter, wonderful painter. His name is Joe Lamantina. I'm a huge collector of his work, and this guy paints every day. Every day he is posting something new that he's creating. It's not that he finishes it in a day, but he paints. He's starting something new every single day. And do I love everything that he does? No, but It is amazing what comes out of just working every single day.
Yeah.
But, for me, that doesn't quite work. For me, I tend to work better when I feel it. When I feel it, I crank stuff out. You know what I mean? Because I've learned the hard way that when I force myself, it's never quite as good. It's never quite as good.
No.
Not to me, though. There's certainly been things that I've written where I've gone, and then other people go, "Oh my God, it's brilliant!" And I'm like, maybe if I did write every day, But for me, it doesn't work that way. And with this story, with this journey that I'm taking people on, it is something where it does become overwhelming writing it because I am taking a step back in time and revisiting the pain that was caused to me, the pain that I've caused to other people, and what it all means to me, what it all meant to me, and what it means to me now, and sort of understanding my own journey, and it becomes a bit overwhelming at times. So I definitely step back. I'm like, step back, cut out, Yeah.
Well, Mr. Bess, it's always a pleasure. I look forward to reading Libretto. It's going to be your opus up to now.
Yes, it'll be the opus.
An artistic feat of monumental proportions, and I can't wait. You deserve it. I'm glad to see you coming out with something. It's been a long time.
Yes, it's been a while. Yes,
but you have had many other celebrations and victories in life that I think you need time to celebrate.
Thank you.
Send my love in regards to your husband. Tell him I said hello.
Thank you.
I know he's not going to come on camera, but
no, he's not here right now. He's not here, but I definitely send it to him. And again, likewise, please give my best to your lovely wife.
Oh, thank you.
And yes, and all the best. Thank you again. I really do appreciate you having me again. This was awesome. As much as I loved the first time, I think I like this time around even more. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Dig into the real shit today. Mr. Bess, thank you. I am going to let you go. I'm going to finish up here, but thank you for joining me.
Awesome. Thank you again. Awesome. Thank you. So are you. Have a good one, sir.
Everybody, thank you for joining Experts. I do want to take 2 minutes to acknowledge this is my 50th episode. I want to thank some of the humans that have been around since the beginning. Mr. Fishback, aka the Logo, thank you for sharing your platform with me. It's great to have a chance to collaborate with you when we do. Me and Rob actually have a lot of really good conversations, and it's amazing. Patty, my second or third guest, Helen, Matt Munoz, my boy Ray, Jared, Glenn, Rachel, Becca, Glenn Feel Better, Michelle Pierre, Kristen, happy birthday, Kristen, Ryan White, Ryan Payne, Asia, Sophia, Mitchell, Danny, Joy, Clarence, who's on the second time. He was on episode 19 before. Randy, Jimmy, Austin, Maxina, Promise, Dr. Fifi, Jake, Karika, Shalisha, Mina, Monique, Kathleen, Jersey, Valerie, Jennifer Suhan, and Mr. Hopman last week. Thank you all for all of your wonderful contributions to the show. And I want to end it with one of my favorite poems. I Lincoln Jews, Dream Deferred. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crushed in sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? So don't let your dreams be deferred, people. I appreciate you all. Thank you for coming on and sharing with me.
Bye.